Before I start this video, let me just remind you that I have a new account for all of my anime content, and I started up my own comedy channel. And a family member of mine from the same place I am is going to start up a YouTube channel about Orthodox Christianity. Their username will be in the description of this video after they've made it. So if you like my accent, check it out just for that. Another thing is that I'm looking for work as a history tutor. I think this channel proves that I'm qualified. Leave me a comment if you want to hire me as a tutor. With that being said, let's get back to the video. First, to understand Saddam Hussein, we need to take a look at the Iraq he was born in. When the winners of World War I conquered large parts of the Middle East from the Ottoman Empire, they wanted to make it as hard as possible for their newly conquered peoples to unite and overthrow them. So they drew borders that crossed religious, ethnic, and other lines so that people with little in common would make up large proportions of the same country's population. The Iraq of 1937, as you can see, was majority Shia. Shias are believers in the second largest sect of Islam. Iraq was also majority Arab, but only half of its population was both Shia and Arab, with large minorities of Kurds and Sunni Arabs. Saddam was born in 1937 to a poor Sunni Arab family in Tikrit, Iraq, also the birthplace of Saladin. The Sunni are members of the largest sect of Islam. Because of his abusive stepfather, he fled to Baghdad when he was just 10 years old. Fast forward to when he graduated from law school and joined the Ba'ath Party in 1962. Another Ba'ath Party rules over Syria. The Ba'ath movement stands for Pan-Arabism, which is basically wanting to unite all Arabs into some super Arab nation. It also stands for secularism, which is separating religion from the state. So despite the fact that Iraq was majority Shia, the Ba'ath Party would go on to give high positions to Sunnis, Christians, and other religious minorities, and tolerated them. The other things Baathism supports are republicanism and socialism. They chose to be secular, republican, and socialist since this was during the Cold War, a time when the USSR and USA were the only superpowers in the world, so you couldn't fight the allies of one without being allies of the other, or else your country would be screwed. And the Baathists wanted support from the USSR, which was militantly atheist, so it definitely wouldn't support a religious or capitalistic state. Not to mention, since Shias were only a slight majority in Iraq, they also feared that religion would divide Arabs. They chose to be pan-Arabists since the borders drawn by the winners of World War I had divided Arab families into different countries and made them a minority in Turkey. They chose the USSR over the USA since they felt racial solidarity with the Palestinians, many of which were expelled from their homes by Israelis who were supported by the USA. The Baathists took over Iraq the following year. Saddam Hussein worked his way up to becoming president of Iraq by nationalizing foreign-owned oil companies in Iraq, which caused oil prices in other countries to skyrocket. Then he used his newly allotted oil wealth to grant education and healthcare to all Iraqis. Eventually, he finished working his way up and became president in 1979, just after Iran had a revolution based on Shiite Islamism. This scared the Baathists of a potential Iranian-funded Shiite revolution in Iraq too. Not to mention the new head of state in Iran, Ayatollah Khomeini, was calling Iraqi Shias to overthrow Saddam. In fact, from 1979 to 1980, there was a big Shia uprising in Iraq that was successfully put down. Moving on, despite the fact that Iran is 3 times the size of Iraq, since Iran had been weakened by revolution, they saw the opportunity to come one step closer to this pan-Arab dream. You see, the largest ethnic group in Iran is the Persians. However, on Iraq's border, there is a part of Iran called Khuzestan, which is dominated by Arabs and has over half of Iran's oil. The Ba'ath Party members in Iraq hated that quote-unquote Arab oil was being exploited for the benefit of Persians. Saddam Hussein also naively believed that the Arabs of Khuzestan would take his side in the case of a war with Iran, but since they were religious Shias and Saddam was a secular Sunni, when Saddam started invading Iran, it made them patriotic Iranians. Not only did Khuzestani Arabs side with Iran, but Shia Arabs in Iraq also revolted. And the Kurds sided with the Iranians. The Iraqi army defeated the Kurds, killing many of them. During the war, the Iraqi army received help from the USSR for obvious reasons, and the USA, since the Islamists in Iran had just overthrown the Shah, a dictator the Americans had installed in Iran. The war dragged on for almost 8 years, and the warfare in it strongly resembles that of World War I, and ended in a stalemate. Kuwait. This war really did a number on the Iraqi economy. Iraq needed time to recover, which Kuwait wouldn't give it. The Emir of Kuwait was bullying Iraq into paying off its debt that it racked up to Kuwait much earlier than Iraq could repay it to fiscally bounce back, despite the fact that it was in Kuwaiti interests for Iraq to wage the war against Iran. Then Kuwaitis began illegally drilling into Iraqi oil and violating OPEC's rules, leading to a financial crisis in Iraq. To put a halt to this illegal drilling and to relieve Iraq of debt owed to Kuwait, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait on August the 2nd of 1990. The tiny country of Kuwait was overwhelmed and completely conquered that same day, and a comprehensive financial and trade embargo was imposed by the United Nations Security Council against Iraq 4 days after Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. After subjugating Kuwait, Iraq shared a border that would make an invasion of Saudi Arabia very easy, which is the country that the US imports most of its oil per capita from. So George Herbert Walker Bush demanded Saddam Hussein remove all of his soldiers from Kuwait. Saddam refused, and this led to another war with Saddam, the Gulf War. George formed a coalition with 34 other countries to reconquer Kuwait from Saddam Hussein. Following this, George asked the people of Iraq to rise up and overthrow Saddam Hussein. This message was repeatedly broadcasted throughout Iraq and contained leaflets dropped by the American Air Force. This led to a number of Kurdish and Shiite Islamist uprisings. Saddam first cracked down on the Shia rebellions, then no-fly zones were established over the Kurdish areas. Since he couldn't use fighter jets, he used helicopters to wear down Kurdish forces before deciding to grant them autonomy. Saddam went on to sanction the Kurdish areas, further damaging Iraqi Kurdistan from sanctions that were already damaging Iraq as a whole. This, combined with Turkey sending Kurdish radicals into Iraqi Kurdistan, led to a ton of infighting in Iraqi Kurdistan. Then after 9/11, Iraq was invaded under the false pretext that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. The best way to sum up the attitude of United States President George W. Bush, son of the previously mentioned George Herbert Walker Bush, is with this clip.
Ground zero. So this is where the first guy got AIDS.
Peter, this is the site of the 9/11 terrorist attacks.
Oh, so Saddam Hussein did this?
No.
The Iraqi army?
No.
Some guys from Iraq?
No.
That one lady who visited Iraq that one time?
No, Peter, Iraq had nothing to do with this. It was a bunch of Saudi Arabians, Lebanese, and Egyptians financed by a Saudi Arabian guy living in Afghanistan and sheltered by Pakistanis.
So you're saying we need to invade Iran?
This other American-led coalition killed Saddam Hussein and put in place a democratic regime. The religious Shia of Iraq, many of which had been suppressed by the Baathists, felt as though it was their turn to oppress Christians and Sunnis. Using their status as the majority in a democratic Iraq, Iraq became firmly under the influence of Iran being another Islamist Shia country, and the Sunni-dominated western portion of Iraq grew resentful. Many Iraqi Sunnis began exploiting Sunni-Shia tensions to try and create a new Sunni country. When Syria had its civil war, they had all the tension they needed, and thus ISIS was created. It's almost as if this happened.
Wealth, fame, power. Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq, obtained these and more the world had to offer. His last words drove countless souls and taxpayer dollars overseas.
My WMDs are yours for the taking, but you'll have to find them first. I left everything I own in one piece.
These words lured terrorists from all over the world to the Middle East, in pursuit of dreams greater than they ever dared to imagine.
به عز ديني وذل البغاة فيا قوم هبوا لدرب الكما فإما حياة تسر الهدى وإما ممات يغيظ العدا صليب الصوارم نشيد الهباء ودرب القتال طريق الحياة فبين اقتحام يبيد الطغاة وكاتم صوت جميل صدى نصد الغزاة ونرفع مجدا ونعلي جباه. أبت أن تذل لغير الإله، أبت أن تذل لغير الإله. صديق الصالح نشيد الهدى ودرب القتال